The first time I ate a meal, I accidentally swallowed the spoon along with it, because in my eyes, metal was the best kind of food. It turned out that I had awakened the weakest level ability, metal control, but as long as I devoured metal, I could keep getting stronger. In the end, through unremitting effort, I became the Emperor of Steel. With a mere raise of my hand, I could control 10,000 flying swords to slay monsters. But what I never expected was that, in the end, it was not monsters that killed me. It was the humans I had fought so desperately to protect. Before dying, all that remained in my heart was unwillingness. If only I had discovered the method to improve my ability earlier, the ending definitely would not have turned out this way. When I opened my eyes again, I found that I had been reborn to the year I had just enlisted. At this moment, the whole class was being punished because some shell casings had gone missing, and those shell casings had long since been eaten by me. As I swallowed the shell casings, the system informed me that the current weight of metal I could control was 300 g, and there were still 10 minutes left before the metal was fully absorbed. The current weight of metal I could control was 300 grams. In this life, I would never let history repeat itself. After all 9 shell casings had been fully absorbed, before everyone went to eat, I sneaked out all the spoons from the cafeteria again. One after another, I swallowed them all whole. But even one spoon only increased it by 1.25 grams. With my current strength, I could at most control a short knife. If I relied only on this scrap metal, who knew when I would ever reach the power I had in my previous life? It seemed that I still had to rely on killing monsters to improve quickly. According to the memories of my previous life, I would receive a mission 3 days later. During those 3 days, I could only keep eating scrap metal first to improve my basic abilities. On a night 3 days later, just as expected, I was sent out to carry out sentry duty. Weight, 359 g. After devouring metal over the past few days, the weight of metal I could control had already reached 359 grams. And not far from the watchtower, monsters were landing one after another from the portal. They came to the cliff directly above the base. At this time, everyone else was still fast asleep. The leading monster had just opened its mouth to give orders, when it was struck on the spot by a short knife that flew out. After the other monsters noticed, they all turned to look in my direction. I raised my hand and retrieved it, and the short knife flew back to my side. Seeing this, the other monsters all became alert, but none of them dared to step forward first. The one I had just struck with the short knife actually slowly stood up again. I had not expected that I would be this weak right now. In my previous life, I had never missed during a surprise attack. Before I could finish speaking, it had already leaped toward me. With a backhand motion, I slashed another knife across its neck. This strike completely killed it, and a red stone dropped out as well. And that was exactly what I had come for tonight. I raised my hand and stuffed that red stone straight into my mouth. This thing was called magic steel. After absorbing it, one would also gain an additional amount of magic power. After swallowing it, I turned my head to look at the other monsters. In my eyes, they had already become a delicious feast. Seeing their companion killed, the monsters immediately swarmed forward and charged at me. Controlling my flying knife, I not only did not retreat, but instead rushed straight at them head-on. Just as I was carrying out a one-sided slaughter against them, on a tree nearby, one monster was coldly watching everything. It tightened its grip on the staff in its hand. As my short knife continued to dance through the air, pieces of magic steel also kept dropping to the ground one after another. When they saw the look in my eyes, as if I wanted to eat every last one of them, they were all so frightened that none of them dared charge forward anymore. I felt the time was about right. Their leader should be showing itself soon. That goblin shaman from my previous life had caused no small amount of damage, so I deliberately exposed an opening to lure it out. After the shaman hiding in the dark saw it, it tore a disc off its collar. It murmured an incantation at it in a low voice. Then it shattered it with its staff, and I had already sensed its approximate location. But in the next second, several sharp stone pillars suddenly rose beneath my feet. After hearing the commotion, someone immediately ran off to report to the captain. But instead, he only woke the captain up and got cursed out first. And when the shaman saw that it had succeeded, it could not help but throw its head back and laugh. That, in turn, let me completely lock onto its position. I controlled the long blade in one monster's hand and slashed it straight down at its head. But it still noticed in time and forcibly blocked the attack. Seeing that my sneak attack had failed, it started laughing smugly again. But what it did not know was that my real killing move was the short knife hidden behind it. At that very moment, it had already flown right in front of it. But what I had not expected still happened. At the very instant the short knife had just pierced the skin of its throat, it actually caught my short knife with its bare hand. As the shaman revealed itself, those lesser monsters also regained their fighting spirit. One had to be especially careful when using magic, and my magic power was already below 40%. At this point, I could only open fire. But if I did that, the Legion would discover that I had left my post without authorization. Just then, I suddenly heard Park Junmoo, who had been standing sentry with me, looking for me. The shaman seized the opportunity and immediately issued orders to the lesser monsters. Those monsters vanished from before my eyes in an instant. They all lunged toward Park Junmoo. I had no time to care about anything else and could only open fire immediately. Then I controlled another long blade and killed one on the spot. Right after that, I dashed forward, shoved the gun barrel into its mouth, and killed another one. When I turned back again, however, I discovered that all the rest had already vanished without a trace. I had not expected this shaman to be even more cautious than I had thought. After hearing the gunshots, the others also began asking about the situation over the radio channel. I could only report the situation at the scene truthfully, and in my heart, I knew that the one in the Legion was about to arrive. Lieutenant Steel-Manhwa, the paladin of AMT. In my previous life, after she arrived at the scene, the first thing she did was seal the portal, and she took away all the items. It was also at that very time that she discovered the legendary item Adamantium. That was the ultimate item that helped me obtain the title of Steel Emperor in my previous life. If I missed the chance to get it in this life, then the ending would be exactly the same as in my previous life. I knew that this shaman had to use living humans as sacrifices, so I began to guess where they would go next to find living people. Just then, over the radio channel, another sentry post suddenly started calling for help, and there came the sound of continuous gunfire as well. That really saved me a lot of trouble. I immediately said over the channel that I was going over at once to provide support. But the captain ordered me to hold my own post to the death, saying that even if a bunch of F ranks went over, what good could it possibly do? I directly cut off the Legion channel. Park Junmoo grabbed me and said that doing this was a serious violation of discipline. I told him that the personnel on duty at that sentry post were an archer and a mage. They had no way of stopping those monsters. But even if you rushed over there, what could you possibly change? Who said I was going alone? You're coming too. Park Junmoo looked at me with a completely stunned expression. And at the sentry post on the other side, the two soldiers had already been seriously injured and were trapped inside a barrier hut. But the attacks outside were growing more and more intense, and the hut could not hold out much longer. Yet at that very moment, it suddenly became quiet outside. Only the sound of gravel grinding against itself could be heard. It turned out that the shaman had torn off another disc and shattered it. It cast a spell, using stones to attack the hut. Both the hut and the barrier began to crack. The soldiers knew very well in their hearts that once those goblins broke into the hut, they would capture them alive, then drag them to the altar and dig out their hearts while they were still alive as a sacrifice. And at this moment, the shaman had already prepared its final blow. Just as they were about to end their own lives, my voice came through the radio. I told the archer to knock an arrow and then use a fire skill, then aim at the place where there was light and do not pull the trigger. Although he did not understand why I wanted him to do that, there was no other way now. Looking outside, it was pitch black all around, and he could see nothing at all. But in the very next second, he saw a light behind the rubble. There I was, holding a monster's head, letting the archer aim. I did not let him shoot immediately, because only I knew when the best moment to strike would be. In the next second, my fingers suddenly curled, and the archer's trigger was pulled at the exact same moment. An arrow flew true and struck the monster right in the chest. Because the arrow had been imbued with a fire skill, the burst of extreme heat inside its body was enough to be fatal. That way, I myself only needed to consume 1% of my magic power. The archer could hardly believe that he had actually hit the target. And the shaman hiding in the dark also noticed my arrival at that moment. It shattered another disc again and controlled the gravel to rise into midair. The moment I saw it, I immediately dodged into the grass nearby to avoid the attack. Then I told the archer not to stop, to keep knocking arrows, and to keep aiming at the light. Right after that, I repeated the same move as before. Before long, I had dealt with two more. At this moment, Park Junmoo also arrived. He had thought that I was only here to distract the monsters and hold out until the main force arrived. But judging from this situation, I clearly intended to block the portal alone. And just at that moment, a monster that had come out to relieve itself discovered him. At the very instant that blade was about to chop down, my short knife arrived in time and saved him. Right after that, I switched on the flashlight I had on me. Then I continued pulling the trigger from afar. The next arrow shot straight at the monster's face. An instant headshot. I told Park Jun-moo that when things really became critical, he just needed to point the gun at the monsters. As for me, I continued repeating the same operation and killed several more. Even though I had already reduced my magic consumption to the minimum, there were simply too many enemies, and I still could not hold out. It seemed that the shaman intended to use the lives of all its subordinates to forcibly drain all my magic power. Just then, I suddenly heard Park Jun-moo's cry for help from nearby. I turned my head and saw that the shaman had seized him while I was distracted. Just as I was calling my short knife back to my side, the shaman had already begun slowly piercing Park Jun-moo's skin. But the shaman did not notice that Park Jun-moo had already pointed the gun at it. Seeing this, I could only stab my short knife into the ground first. At the very instant the monster was about to chop at my head, I reached out and began controlling Park Jun-moo's trigger. As I remotely pulled the trigger, the gunshot rang out, directly shattering the disc the shaman used to cast spells, and it severely wounded it as well. I also immediately lunged forward, dodging the attack from behind me. Seeing that the situation had turned bad, the shaman turned and tried to flee back to the portal. The duck at my mouth was about to fly away, and I instantly panicked. But right then, I suddenly noticed that the necklace around its neck seemed to be strung together with iron wire. So I immediately stretched out my hand and tried to control that necklace. To my surprise, it actually worked. Right after that, with the last bit of magic power I had left, I controlled my short knife and drove it viciously down toward the top of its head. The moment I had just finished it off, I saw a firework rise up in the distance. I knew that light was the holly lamp, and that also meant that Su-in-ha had arrived. I immediately began rummaging through the shaman's corpse. At last, I finally found adamantium. But just at that moment, the main force had also arrived and ordered me to raise my hands. After swallowing it, I slowly turned around and said, "Friendly." Su-in-ha also came over to inspect the scene. Looking at the corpses all over the ground, she was clearly a little puzzled that 4 ordinary soldiers had actually killed a boss monster. But very soon, she sensed that something was wrong. The wounds on the corpses lying on the ground were almost exactly the same. This was obviously the work of a single person. And as I lay on the stretcher, I could hardly describe how happy I felt. The current weight of metal I could control was 359 g, and the system informed me that I had successfully consumed the legendary item adamantium. A massive increase was coming. After it was absorbed, a magic skill would be activated, and the weight of controllable metal might also increase dramatically. Seo Yunha kept seeing me smile and thought I had been scared stupid. Next came the real purpose behind my desperate devouring of adamantium. That was to awaken a rare detection skill and sense the sounds made by all metal within a certain range. I've finally recovered. It seems I'm not far from becoming the Iron Emperor. A few days after the gate incident passed, the story of me, an F rank, had already spread everywhere. The archer from that night was being questioned by 2 people. One of them was Oh Sang-guk, the captain of the 2nd squad. The other was Lee Won-suk, who was known as the Barbarian. Moonrai had previously used some methods to have himself, originally D rank, evaluated as C rank. Clearly, they did not really believe what the archer said happened that night. In the end, they decided to teach me a lesson and make me face reality. At the same time, I was also summoned by the battalion commander. His name was Kim Gang-suk. He was B rank and ranked 166th on the combat power rankings. Standing to the side was Seo Yunha, a B rank with the paladin trait, and Lee Min-hee, a C-rank mage type with the distortion trait. The moment Kim Gang-suk opened his mouth, he asked me whether I had disobeyed the order to stay put. He also asked whether I had blocked the first wave of the gate's outbreak. I knew very well that if I said even one wrong word now, I would be judged. I told him directly, yes, I discovered the gate while on duty and immediately took countermeasures. Under normal logic, an F-rank soldier like you should have died on the spot. In my tension, I instantly felt the terrifying pressure bearing down from ahead. If I retreated now, I would never have another chance to turn things around in the future. I spoke and told him that I had actually been deceived by the battalion commander for so long. Lee Min-hee beside him had just wanted to interrupt me, but the battalion commander told him to shut up and let me continue, and asked why. Because during every group training session, the battalion commander would repeatedly emphasize this matter. May I ask, do you still remember it? No matter how low a person's rank is, as long as they follow the ATM Monster Combat Tactics Manual, even an E rank can defeat an ogre. I have always kept that sentence from the battalion commander firmly in my heart. Although it is hard for me, as an F rank, to defeat an ogre, defeating a few goblins is not impossible. But if I had stayed where I was at the time and not gone to support them, those personnel on duty would all have died. I remember that you once said that a true soldier has no distinction of rank. The reason I was able to endure the mockery of being F rank in ATM for so long was precisely because I saw in the battalion commander the spirit of a truly strong man. But today, the one denying this conviction of mine turned out to be you, battalion commander. I knew that in my previous life, he encountered a gate opening just after he had been promoted to second lieutenant. Although he had nearly lost his life in battle with the orcs, he still returned without the slightest hesitation, and he became one of the founding veterans in the early days of ATM. Now I had taken his words as my faith and risked my life to protect my comrades. Could he really bring himself to judge someone like me? The next second, he walked straight over and grabbed both my arms. So this is your conviction. From this moment on, you are promoted to Deputy Non-Commissioned Officer. At the same time, the system also notified me that the adamantium had been fully absorbed. The current weight of metal I could control was 558 grams. Not only had I obtained the body steelization skill, but the controllable metal weight had also increased to 558 grams. The two people beside us were stunned on the spot after hearing the battalion commander's words. And as the battalion commander looked at me, his eyes even welled up with tears as he slowly nodded. Even I myself had not expected that he would promote me directly. After that, I went to the physical training room. I thought to myself that in order to avoid judgment, I had really stepped in dogshit and gotten lucky. But if I really became a deputy non-commissioned officer, standing out too much might not be a good thing either. Fortunately, Lee Min-hee had just stepped forward and said that there had never been a precedent in ATM for an F rank to become a deputy non-commissioned officer. Only then did I barely manage to gain a little time for consideration. At that moment, Lee Won-suk walked over and asked me whether I was done using the exercise equipment. Then he started adding more and more weight onto it. After lifting it, he deliberately said that if a celebrity who had been so popular lately could only train with this kind of weight, then he would bring shame to our squad. What? The moment those words came out, everyone around turned to look at me. Then Oh Sang-guk called several more people over, and they started jeering and laughing on the side. I immediately understood. That scum was behind it. If I still hid from them this time, the result would only be the same as in my previous life. They would only become more and more excessive, and in the end openly torture me. So I turned around directly and challenged Lee Won-suk to a boxing match. They all thought they had heard wrong. An F rank actually dared to challenge Lee Won-suk, the man known as the Barbarian. For a moment, the news spread quickly to everyone's ears. Soon, we walked together into the octagonal cage. He could hardly wait to tear me apart with his own hands. As the fight began, he immediately threw a punch at me. And just at that moment, an extraordinary figure also arrived outside. His name was Steel-Manhwa, the tactical instructor of the Black Tiger unit. This unit was AMT's most elite division, and aside from its name, everything else about it was top secret. He had originally come to see Choi Young-jun, who was called an ace. He had heard that this newcomer had the potential to become a sword saint, but it just so happened that the other party was on leave. Naturally, the leader beside him did not want to miss this opportunity. He immediately said that there was another seedling here with the barbarian trait, known as the next ace. As he spoke, he was about to take Steel-Manhwa over to have a look. And the battle inside the octagonal cage was still continuing. Relying on my small frame, I kept dodging his attacks. But I was still hit by one of his punches and forced back to the edge of the cage. Seizing the opportunity, he threw another punch at my face. But I still dodged it by turning sideways. After steadying myself, I even coldly mocked him. That instantly enraged him completely. And at this time, Steel-Manhwa also walked into the room and began watching the match. The leader beside him kept praising Lee Won-suk, saying every one of his punches was full of power. What use is power if it can't hit? As time passed bit by bit, Oh Sang-guk below the stage was the first to lose patience and asked whether he was going easy on me. Even the people who had bet on him to win also started joining in jeering. But at this moment, only Lee Won-suk himself knew best. For some reason, his body felt abnormally heavy today, because every time he wanted to rush up and attack me, I would control the metal on his shoes and drag it downward. His whole body felt as if it had sunk into a swamp, and because of that, his original attack trajectory would also be forcibly pulled off course. There was no rhythm to his fighting at all. Wait, something seems wrong with my legs. What, your legs have already gone weak so quickly? Being humiliated like this by an F-rank piece of trash. He finally decided to use his true power and personally defend his dignity. The next second, he directly activated his trait and completed bodily enhancement. and I had not the slightest fear either, as I slowly clenched both my fists. Cheon Myonho knew very clearly that bodily enhancement was no longer within the scope of ordinary boxing practice, but he discovered that my gaze did not waver in the slightest. At this moment, in his eyes, it was like an enraged buffalo confronting a leopard that had hidden fangs and had been waiting all along to strike. That made his interest rise instantly, and after the bodily enhancement, Lee Won-suk's speed also soared accordingly. The next second, his whole person vanished from where he stood. With one punch, he blasted me flying away. When the people below the stage saw this scene, cheers immediately erupted. But inside Lee Won-suk's heart, he was secretly groaning, because that punch just now had felt as if he had smashed into a steel plate. When using high-hardness magic metal, the skill level increases, because I had used a new skill, Steel Body Transformation. I had already turned both arms beneath my clothes into hard steel. Then I coldly mocked him again. Sure enough, he was enraged again and charged at me once more. I first dodged sideways, then I turned my entire foot into steel, and with a vicious kick, I struck his leg. The next second, his center of gravity slipped out of control and he started to fall straight down. I followed up closely and smashed a punch into his face. Then I rushed up and unleashed a frenzied follow-up combo. Everyone below the stage was dumbfounded by what they had just seen. Cheon Myongho's heart shook. This leopard had finally bared its fangs, and with one bite, it had latched tightly onto the buffalo's throat. But not long after, he grabbed me and lifted me up with one hand. You despicable bastard, although I don't know what trick you used. But this ends here. The moment those words fell, he prepared to smash me violently into the ground. I immediately exerted force and fiercely twisted his arm. He also instantly felt a burst of intense pain. I stopped when I was still 2.5 centimeters from the ground, because I had already used a standard flying armbar to lock his arm tightly. If he smashed down just like this, Lee Won-suk's arm would break together with it. But an ordinary person simply could not possibly use an armbar on a barbarian in a state of bodily enhancement. Cheon Myongho thought to himself that if this continued, Lee Won-suk would really lose. Had he perhaps expected too much from this man? And I indeed had no way to keep bending his arm until it broke. Just as he was preparing to swing his other fist at me, I directly released his arm and quickly dodged away. Then in an instant I switched position and mounted above his head. Both my hands locked tightly around his neck, forming a standard rear naked choke. When Cheon Myongho saw the scene, only two words appeared in his heart: beautiful. Lee Won-suk thought that with a little trick like this, he could just pry it open by brute force. But he had no idea that what he was facing now was steel. In an instant, I turned both my arms completely into steel. He simply could not believe that with his strength, he still could not pry them apart. And the system also notified me at this moment that the standard limit had already been exceeded. But I still did not loosen my grip and only stared fixedly below the stage. Oh, Sang-guk was also frightened by that single glance from me. Lee Won-suk was utterly unwilling to accept that he would actually lose to an F rank. He was clearly supposed to be the next ace. The next second, the muscles all over his body swelled again. He directly smashed through the ceiling of the room. But if he still could not break free of the choke, then he really might be strangled to death alive. Cheon Myongho had already begun to look forward to finding out who the true predator really was. I knew I could not drag it out any longer, so I used every ounce of strength in my body. I squeezed until his whole face began to flush with severe congestion. In the end, he finally could not hold on and passed out on the spot. With a thud, Lee Won-suk collapsed. When Cheon Myongho saw it, his eyes were full of excitement. He thought that I was the true beast of prey in the military. Everyone hurried forward to check and found that Lee Won-suk had only fainted. My friend also quickly came over to see whether I had been hurt. But I only found Oh Sang-guk in the crowd and stared at him fixedly. After feeling the pressure from me, he did not even dare to look at me again. At this time, Cheon Myongho walked over and asked my name. I told him that my name was Lee Hyun-uk, though in my heart I was wondering why this person had appeared here. He also took the initiative to state his identity. Then he asked me whether I had any interest in special operations. I'm sorry, I'm just an F-rank player. Rank is only a standard set by ordinary people. What we need are warriors like you. Of course I was unwilling in my heart, because the Legion was too closed off and would restrict freedom. And when facing villain organizations head-on in the future, they would most likely only hold me back. So I had to keep my distance from them. In the end, I only replied to Cheon Myongho with one sentence: I'll think about it. Immediately afterward, Cheon Myongho was invited by the battalion commander to have tea. and he took the opportunity to tell the battalion commander about the Black Tiger Special Unit being short of manpower. Recently, as long as someone reached C rank, they would receive invitations from guilds. People we finally managed to train with great difficulty would then be poached by outsiders, so in fact our situations were equally difficult. After the two exchanged a glance, the battalion commander asked him whether this trip had originally been for Choi Young-jun. Cheon Liang-ho also understood that the so-called leave was just an excuse, merely to guard against him coming to poach people. However, precisely because of that, I ended up discovering an interesting soldier. Who was it? Corporal Lee Hyun UK. While I was running at night, the battalion commander looked at me and made a phone call. He told the person on the other end of the line to investigate what I had been doing before joining the Legion. After hearing the report, he told the person on the other end again to handle Corporal Lee's follow-up just like that. Soldier, this is not my fault. Who told you to keep constantly arousing my interest? At the same time, in some corner of the city, at an entrance and exit labeled exit, a child saw a monkey. So he chased after it. But after he saw that monkey's face clearly, his whole body was frightened stiff on the spot, unable to move at all. And behind that monster, there were countless more monsters just like it, as well as a gate suspended in midair. And on the Legion's side, the battalion commander acknowledged my achievements. So they told me to enter the armory and choose a weapon for myself. But Suingha immediately stated on the spot that she did not believe me. I sneered inwardly. She had been this stubborn in my previous life, and she still had not changed in this one. Whether you believe it or not, hasn't all of this already happened? The sword marks on those monsters around the portal are completely identical. In other words, you alone held back the first outbreak by yourself. Do you think that makes sense? I did not answer. I only calmly told her, I choose this one. She looked at the broken sword in my hand and could not understand it at all. Then she told me to be serious and choose again. It absorbs water and releases water mist, but only I know that although this sword looks unimpressive now, in the future, Choi Young-jun will rely on it to earn the title of Sword Saint. The true name of this item is actually Dark Hand of the Cloud Master. In mythology, those who govern the weather are the Wind Master, the Rain Master, and the Cloud Master, and the Cloud Master has a dark hand known as the Hand of Darkness. If explained directly, its meaning is, the blade hidden within the clouds. And the true power of this blade actually comes from the Thunder Lord. When its potential is fully developed, it can even release powerful lightning and single-handedly defeat a mid-level monster dungeon. Steel and lightning are the strongest combination. With your achievements, choosing this worn-out piece of junk, don't you think that's a pity? I think it doesn't matter. Anyway, I don't have time to choose slowly. The moment I finished speaking, the base alarm rang out. After everyone received the news that a portal had appeared in the city, they immediately got up and prepared. Suingha looked at me and realized that after hearing the alarm, I was not surprised at all. It was as if I had been waiting for this moment, calm to a terrifying degree. Very soon, everyone rushed to the city and sealed off the scene at once. Members of the Blue Flame Guild walked down the street wearing armor. The Legion soldiers watched them with envy all over their faces. And I had already gathered all the members of my squad. After explaining the intelligence sent back from the scene, I told them that goblins were skilled at using poison gas, so under no circumstances were they to roll up the sleeves of their combat suits. When the two people beside us saw that, they immediately came over and mocked us as a trash squad. I warned them that even if they stayed in the rear, they still had to wear their gas masks properly, but they did not take it seriously at all. I could only remind the others once again that they had to maximize their protection. Because in my previous life, this was where my neck was pierced by a poison dart. The next second, poison gas began to spew from the ground. By the time everyone was about to lose their ability to fight, the goblins finally revealed themselves and began slaughtering mercilessly. And I too was poisoned and collapsed to the ground, completely unable to move. Their leader walked up to me and wanted to gouge out my eyes. Although Park Junmoo arrived in time and saved me, I still lost one eye because of it. But just as he had handed me the gas mask, his head was cut off by a goblin's blade. So in this life, I absolutely cannot let anything happen to him again. I told him that once he saw my signal later, he had to immediately lead the squad members out of the combat zone. He asked me in shock, wouldn't that make us deserters? With a serious expression, I told him, this is a tactic. At the same time, the warriors stationed on the front line had all taken their positions. At a single command, they quickly broke in through the door. Then they immediately formed a defensive formation. Around them, there were also several magic arrays jointly deployed by magic-type fighters. The moment the goblins charged forward in groups, the rifles and magic arrays opened fire at the same time, pouring firepower at them like mad. The overwhelming suppressive fire kept the goblins from advancing even a single step. And I, leading my squad on the perimeter, also began to get busy. We installed sensors at every sewer and exit. When Li Mingxi saw this, he walked over to me. He said there was no need to make such a fuss over a mere goblin portal. Anyway, the Blue Flame Guild was already here to provide support. He also told me to take my squad to replenish the antidotes. I directly raised my voice and told him that the order our support squad had received was to prevent monsters fleeing from the front line from entering the residential district. Everyone nearby heard what I said, so he did not dare keep making things difficult for me. The captain only praised you once, and now you're already getting carried away. As he said this, he even tried to poke my head with his hand. Just then, a girl ran over this way. She asked what we were doing here. Her name was Choi Sianha, and she was a C-rank magic-type healer. The moment Li Mingxi saw that girl, he froze completely. This girl was his greatest weakness, and also the reason I had deliberately provoked his hostility. He quickly threw an arm around me and said that he had just been explaining the situation on site to me. Then he asked Choi Sianha what she was doing here. Only then did she remember that she still had a task. She said the captain had something to discuss with me and wanted me to go over there. After bringing me out, Choi Sianha even comforted me and told me not to take Li Mingxi's words too seriously. She also said she would handle installing the remaining sensors, so I should go without worry. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Suingha and a sniper were monitoring every movement at the scene. We are clearly the captain's direct assault squad, so why do we still have to participate in this kind of mission? This is the captain's order. Obeying is enough. The scene shifted to the captain's temporary command post. Only after entering did I realize that it was not just the captain here. Even that Qian Minghu from earlier was here as well. How could the two of them be together? Immediately afterward, the captain told me that he wanted to test me once and have me replace the vacationing Choi Youngjun as the leader of Squad 1 to carry out the second-round extermination mission at the Goblin Portal. I knew very well in my heart that the captain, who had shown no interest in me in my previous life, must have a reason for looking at me this way now, but I had no time to think it through. If I went back any later, things would unfold just as they had in my previous life. So I directly said that I could not accept gambling with my comrades' lives for this test. The captain coldly told me that this was an order. At that moment, news came over the radio that the boss monster had escaped. If I did not go back now, everyone in the rear would die. Captain, forgive my bluntness. Speak. I heard that when you carried out your first mission, you lost all your squad members. Since you have experienced something like that, and yet now you still want an F rank from a support squad to take command. In your eyes, are those ordinary soldiers also nothing more than a price to be expended? After hearing this, the captain said I had misunderstood. On the contrary, that was precisely why he was sending the direct assault squad along with me. Although I was very grateful that the captain was willing to place expectations on me, if the price of verifying me is the lives of my comrades, then I refused to obey this order. Qian Minghu reminded me that disobeying orders in wartime was punishable by death. Of course I knew that in my heart, but if I did not go back now, the squad members would truly lose their lives. The captain was clearly moved by what I said. In the end, he allowed me to go back and continue carrying out my original mission. But afterward, I would have to bear the consequences of disobeying orders like a soldier. After hearing that, I immediately turned and rushed out. Seeing how flustered I was, Suingha, who was observing from upstairs, also had a trace of doubt flash through her eyes. And the moment I rushed back, I shouted, "Watch out for poison gas." The next second, the sensors in the sewers were triggered. Hearing the alarm, everyone instantly fell into panic. Immediately afterward, large amounts of poison gas gushed wildly out of the sewer openings. Damn it, the goblins are arriving even faster than in my memory. I immediately put on my gas mask. Then I pulled out the broken sword from my item bag and poured all the water from my canteen onto it. But the cloud sword's water absorption rate only rose to 25%. There was only one thought left in my heart: Junmu, you must lead the soldiers out alive. Meanwhile, on the other side, Park Junmu was already fighting the goblins head-on. At that moment, Choi Sianha was so frightened that she had shrunk to the ground, trembling all over. Park Junmu had originally wanted to tell her to pull herself together. But on second thought, she was only 20 years old. Even he himself was scared to death, let alone her. After resisting for a while, everyone quickly ran out of ammunition. In order to save his squad members, he slowly took out his weapon. The monster compendium had written that goblins like shiny, glittering things. although he knew that his weak electric shock ability could not kill even a single one. At the very least, the light it emitted could serve as bait to buy his teammates a chance to escape with their lives. As long as they could escape, the Blue Flame Guild would definitely come to support them. After saying that, he raised his arm high and charged madly inward. And those goblins were immediately drawn to the light in his hand. One after another, they turned around and chased after Park Junmoo. Just as the goblins were about to pounce on him and knock him down, the short blade under my control arrived in time. The few goblins in front were instantly killed. Park Junmoo was just as brave as he had been in my memory. And I then raised the cloud sword and began neutralizing the toxins in the air. Then I praised him for doing well. From here on out, leave it to me. Looking at so many goblins in front of me, I was already unable to stop myself from drooling. If I ate them all, I wonder how much the weight of metal I can control would increase. Well then, it is time to enjoy this delicious feast. I raised my hand and controlled the short sword to fly into the monster horde. In an instant, it cut down the first few in front. Seeing their companions killed so easily, the monsters behind them also started to become cautious. I had originally wanted to pick up the dropped magic metal and have a good feast, but Park Junmoo was still watching from nearby, so I had no choice but to give it up. Just as I was wondering why I had still not seen their leader, the brands on their heads suddenly lit up altogether. Immediately afterward, a shriek came from the darkness. As if they had received some kind of summons, the monsters began to retreat. The moment I saw the direction in which they were withdrawing, it was exactly where my squad members were, so I immediately got up and rushed to support them. From above, Suingha watched every single one of my actions. She felt that my reactions were as if I already knew in advance what was going to happen. So she wanted to come and confirm something with me. The members on my side had already suffered heavy casualties, but the deputy squad leader, who was a healer, was frightened into clutching her head and crying. Just then, the leader of this group of monsters launched another attack. Even the last shield carrying a barrier was smashed by it. Seeing this, the monsters all lunged forward. Just as the squad members thought they were doomed to die, I arrived close behind this group of monsters. At a glance, I saw their leader. Then I directly controlled the short sword and sent it flying toward it. But it noticed very quickly and dodged sideways. I immediately manipulated the short sword again and continued the pursuit. It had not expected the short sword to be able to turn, so it could only dodge in a panic. But in the end, it was still caught by the short sword. Only this strike hit the jar behind it. After the jar cracked open, green thick smoke immediately billowed out. When it saw this, it was completely enraged by my actions. The next second, the brands on those monsters' heads lit up again. Then they all leaped from in front of me to both sides. Just as I was still wondering what they were trying to do, they simultaneously blew out poison darts. In an instant, thousands of poison darts came at us head-on. I first leaped forward and blocked the poison darts from the left side. Then I raised my hand and activated my skill toward the right side. The metal control conversion was happening too fast, and at present the weight I could control was still under 3 kilograms. So while I was controlling these poison darts, I also lost my connection with the short sword. Seeing me in such a sorry state, the leader let out a chilling laugh. At that moment, I finally understood. This leader was not commanding this group of monsters. It was personally manipulating them. I realized that bringing Park Junmoo with me was too dangerous, so I wanted to send him back to the squad's position first. But just then, another wave of poison darts flew in from behind. I turned around and activated metal control once again, letting Park Junmoo enter the position first. After I also retreated inside, the squad members finally caught their breath and restored the barrier. Seeing that I had already entered the position, the leader stopped attacking. It knew very well that if it charged in by force now, the casualties would definitely be heavy. After I finished mocking it and turned back, I discovered that my squad members had already completely fallen apart, and one of them was seriously injured and already near death. But I remembered clearly that the deputy squad leader was right here. When I looked, she was crouched in the corner, trembling. Even when I called her, she gave no response at all. I knew that if she continued sinking in panic, the consequences would be extremely severe. Corporal Choi Seonha, are you planning to get everyone killed? Pull yourself together. After I said this, she slowly turned her gaze toward me. Do you know how painful it is to live in regret? After Xianxu said those words, she finally awoke from her panic. Not long after, brilliant light lit up within our position. That was Choi Seonha using healing magic to heal the squad members. After that, I borrowed all of everyone's short swords. Only when Park Junmoo came back to his senses did he realize how I had suddenly become this strong. And after controlling the short swords, I slowly walked out of the position and stopped at a place where I had made a mark. Because the poison gas around us was too dense, it was impossible to see anything clearly. And their leader had once again hidden itself in the darkness. It was manipulating the monsters under its command, preparing to launch an attack against me. In their eyes, this prey, had walked into the most convenient place to hunt, and they must be excited to the extreme now. But they did not know that this place was centered around the marker, and as long as I could now find the leader hiding in the dark, this battle would be over. Thinking of this, I immediately activated metal detection. In an instant, the weapons in these monsters' hands were all exposed within my mind. Then I controlled 5 short swords and sent them flying behind the crates. Toward that area, I launched indiscriminate attacks. And because the space was too cramped, they had no time to dodge. Just as one of the short swords was about to hit the leader, a magic array spread open in its palm. It forcibly stopped the short sword, but precisely because of that, I locked onto its position. Then I drove all the remaining short swords toward the direction where it was. I saw flames surge above its head. It actually forcibly seized control of all the short swords. When I tried to call the short swords back, I discovered that they were being suppressed by a controlling force even stronger than mine. Just then, the brands on the heads of several monsters beside me lit up again. They began firing poison darts at me. Under those circumstances, there was no way I could block them. I could only take them head-on with my arms. At the same time, those short swords also completely slipped out of control and fell to the ground. With one command from the leader, the monsters pounced toward me. In my previous life, it was because I was struck by poison darts that I lost my squad members. How could I possibly make the same mistake again in this life? Because before the poison darts flew over, I had already activated Steel Body. Taking advantage of the leader lowering its guard, I summoned the short swords back again. At this moment, almost all the monsters had rushed out from the darkness. Next came the moment of slaughter. I precisely controlled several short swords. They continuously weaved among the monsters, killing them one after another. Because the speed was too fast, it even stirred up a small vortex around me. Before long, I had slaughtered them all cleanly. Seeing this, the leader was shocked to the extreme. Afterward, it released even more poison gas from the jar behind it. The concentration of the poison gas was so high that I could not even see the area around me. To isolate you alone, I really went to a lot of trouble. After saying that, I once again locked onto its position through metal sensing. But if I carelessly manipulated the short swords to attack now, control of them would definitely be snatched away by it again. So this strike had to be handled cautiously. Just as I was wondering why it had not made a move for so long, several black electric currents suddenly appeared beneath my feet. So that was why it had used the poison gas to block vision, to secretly launch its attack. By the time I noticed, it was already too late. I could only be dragged down to the ground by it. Then it lifted me up with one hand, all the way up into the air more than 10 meters high. Then it released its control of the black electric currents, and sent me crashing heavily toward the ground. After the leader saw that there was no movement ahead for a long time, it burst into triumphant laughter. But the next second, its laughter came to an abrupt halt, and its eyes widened suddenly, because it saw that I could actually still stand up. Although I had already turned my lower body into steel, the damage from the impact still left me a little injured. It immediately lowered its body and entered combat stance again. In an instant, it rushed behind me. Then it aimed at my back, preparing to launch a backstab. But I dodged that strike by turning sideways. In my previous life, I died because someone attacked me from behind. I grabbed its arm in one motion. Then I once again turned my lower body into steel, and viciously kicked it in the face. From the very first day I was reborn, every night I imagined taking revenge with my own hands on scum like you who attack me. You should feel fortunate. Among that group of bastards, you are the first one I have come to settle accounts with. Your mask is already broken. After the leader got back up, it turned and ran. But no matter how fast it was not faster than these short swords of mine. Watching it crawl on the ground in such a wretched state, I felt indescribably satisfied. In my previous life, it was because of it that I had lived for so many years like a cripple. And back then, it had also stabbed out my eyes. As I slowly thrust the cloud sword into its abdomen, the unknown aura, 1%, actually began absorbing the leader's blood essence, until it sucked it completely dry. The cloud sword's charge also reached 11%. At this moment, I had finally erased the first shadow of the past. Just as I was about to leave, the leader actually dropped something. When I picked it up and looked, it was actually a demon's medal. And this one was precisely the Hellfire medal containing the power of the guardian of the demon race. But how could this medal appear here? I clearly remember this was that guy's item. To the surviving humans, his undead legion was no different from hell. Because of that, he was known as the most vicious villain in the human camp, the Necromancer. Although in my previous life there was almost no public information about him, everyone knew that, like me, he possessed a non-growth trait, which meant that neither of us became stronger through ordinary combat or training, but could only grow through our own specific methods. In my previous life, I finally managed to obtain an imitation of Blaze in his sulfur fire golem workshop. But why would the real Blaze appear at this point in time? It seems there are still many things I do not know. Just as I was about to swallow it, Suinha suddenly appeared and called out to stop me. The first thing she asked was who I really was. I had no choice but to hide the medal behind my back first. My heart sank immediately. But at that moment, another woman walked over. As she handed me a business card, she said she was the strategy director of the Blue Flame Guild. This person was far too familiar to me. Her name was Lu Haina, the second daughter of the guild master of Blue Flame, the strongest private guild. Among those villains who drove humanity to the brink of extinction, she was the one I would never forget. Because in my previous life, Suinha died at her hands while protecting me. And the reason she came this time was to recruit me into the Blue Flame Guild. I knew that I was still no match for her now, so I could only force down my anger. At that moment, Suinha spoke up and said this was an operation zone, telling her to leave. But how could someone as arrogant as her possibly obey so meekly? For a moment, the atmosphere at the scene instantly tightened. Just then, a jeep slowly drove over. The battalion commander stepped out of the vehicle and looked around. The first thing he saw was monster corpses all over the ground. Then he saw the monster leader I had slain. His expression also darkened accordingly. I thought my strength was about to be exposed. Unexpectedly, the battalion commander first greeted Lu Haina. Then, on the grounds that this was an operation zone, he asked her to leave. Although Lu Haina was not afraid of Suinha, before someone of the battalion commander's level, she ultimately did not dare act recklessly. Before leaving, she even left a lip print on the business card. Then she slipped the card into my clothes. Only after teasing me a little did she turn around and leave. Right after that, the battalion commander directly appointed me as the squad leader of the cleanup operation. For a moment, I could not figure out what he was planning. After the battle was completely over, he even told me to personally report the entire situation to him. As she was leaving, Suinha even turned back and glared at me. Only then did I finally breathe a sigh of relief, thinking that this time I had temporarily gotten through the crisis. The scene shifted to the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Demon Suppression Brigade 1 week later. At this time, I had just absorbed the Blaze Metal and increased my controllable weight by 499 grams. Moreover, I was also activating the breathing chamber in my stomach. Although I had gone through this process once before, this body was still too weak now, so the pain would only be stronger. After hearing my voice, Park Junmo pushed the door open and came in to check. He even thought I was hiding in there watching some kind of dirty movie. But I was already in so much pain that I could not even speak. My whole body was burning with terrifying heat. The light radiating from me even illuminated the entire restroom. At last, the breathing chamber was successfully activated. It could store part of the metal, and it could also let me absorb the metal I swallowed more quickly. After going through this incident, although I had made preparations in advance, in the end, many people still died. And precisely because of this, I gave up the idea of protecting everything by myself. I began giving the squad members high-intensity training. But immediately after that, 2 problems that gave me a headache also emerged. The first problem was that from that day on, Choi Seonha kept clinging to me. That also made the simp by her side hostile toward me. The second problem was that the battalion commander said I no longer needed to serve as a vice sergeant and directly appointed me as an officer. By now, I would no longer be surprised by something like this. The battalion commander said that this operation had earned me his trust, and I merely told him that I would think it over carefully during my leave. 3 weeks later, my leave finally began. But I knew the next portal would also arrive soon. Maybe even the current me would not be able to stop it. In my previous life, the Legion had even tacitly abandoned that station in front of the national media, along with all the civilians inside. So during this leave, I had to make absolutely thorough preparations. But as soon as I walked out of the station, I ran into Choi Seonha. Only while chatting did I learn that she was also out on leave. After walking together with her for part of the way, we separated. For the next 4 days and 3 nights, I had to prepare myself to face the future. And the first step was making money. As I looked at the advertisement on the wall, I remembered the chief culprit who killed me in my previous life. That guy Freecy's dark funds had always been operating in secret. They were used to bribe high-ranking figures, players, and to purchase items. The core problem behind our defeat to the villains was still money, as well as where and when the funds were concentrated. As long as you invest faster, more accurately, and more ruthlessly than others, even if it is only a small amount, it can still snowball and grow bigger and bigger. As soon as I stepped onto the stairs, I heard a noisy commotion coming from inside the house. It turned out that the Hope Guild had not received a commission for a long time. This time, they had finally managed to get a job as event security. Only after seeing me come in did they stop. The white-haired man opened his mouth and immediately said, "Long time no see, you trash manipulator." His name was Lee Wunchiel. He was someone I had known since my school days. Back then, I could only control very light metal, and I did not know how to improve my ability. So he had always bullied me as if I were trash. I directly chose to ignore him and walk toward my brother. A trash manipulator dares to act this calm. As he said this, he walked over, wanting to teach me a lesson. But before he could get close, my brother stopped him. I looked at him coldly and said, "You can try again now." The moment he heard that, he flew into a rage. Clenching his fist, he swung it toward my face. But his fist stopped dead at a position 2.5 centimeters from my face. Because now, it was not just one steel pen aimed at his eye. Every vital point on his body was locked onto by sharp weapons. My eyes had already told him that if he took one more step forward, he would become crippled. Just then, after a man walked in, I immediately gave up control of the weapons. Then I threw myself into Lee Wunchiel's arms and apologized to him. I whispered in his ear, "I heard you were kicked out of the White Tiger Guild. Because during your first portal raid, you got so scared that you ran away on the spot. If you do not want others to find out about this, then be sensible and get the hell out right now." The next day, Lee Wunchiel still took people to carry out that security commission. He was already full of anger because of what happened yesterday. And then the event organizer even came over to scold him. Already in a rage, he punched the organizer to the ground, then pinned him to the floor and beat him viciously. After the beating, he even declared that he would put out a bounty on me and make me pay a painful price. As for me, I also told my brother about the projects that could make money in the future. And I also told him that the 3 top forces all wanted to recruit me. I used the excuse that they had personally disclosed this information to me. Afraid that he would not believe me, I even showed him my chat records with the battalion commander. The person I had always called brother was named Park Kyolsu, the president of the Hope Guild, and his trait belonged to the Analyst series. In my previous life, it was also he who helped me find the method for growing my ability. In the end, I handed all the inheritance my parents left behind to him, and asked him to invest it for me. The reason I trusted him so much was because, in my previous life, when no one believed in me, he alone had given me warmth, and he had also invested in me. In the future, humanity would encounter otherworldly races capable of communication. Through communicating with them, humanity would obtain new technology and power. And in the future struggle against portals and monsters, their technology would be crucial. So what I needed now was to gain the ability to communicate with the other world. Only then could I learn their technology and then cultivate a group of experts loyal only to me. So now, what I had to do was first find those 7 dwarf blacksmiths, and before the villains noticed, bring all those S-rank craftsmen under my control. So I came to a blacksmith shop. The owner of this shop was named Kong Jiangdu, and he himself was an S-rank craftsman. At a glance, I recognized the javelin in his hand forged from orichalcum. Although it still looked very crude now, later on, it would pierce the heart of the dragon Tarax. It would become the dragon spear that shocked the world. Legend had it that it was this shabby workshop where the very first S-rank item was born into this world. Just then, Kong Jiangdu's granddaughter walked in. Because in my previous life she had been my comrade in arms, seeing her again now only made me feel exceptionally familiar and exceptionally close to her. She was the future S-rank blacksmith, Kong Bakeseal. After Kong Jiangdu died, she inherited all of his craftsmanship. At a glance, she could tell that the clothes I was wearing were not cheap. She immediately changed her expression and asked me what I wanted to buy. Looking at how blindly greedy for money she really was just like a dwarf. Before long, I bought 100,000 won's worth of goods. Looking at me, Kong Jiangdu said that I was clearly not of the mage type, so why was I buying poison attribute magic metal that I could not wield, as well as mithril tungsten alloy beads? I only told him that I needed these things very badly. I also said that the goods here were very good and that I would come again next time. In my previous life, Kong Bakeseal had gone through life and death battles with me, only to die in battle in the end. So this time, I would definitely protect her. After returning to my residence, I took out that bag of poisonous metal and began eating the pieces one by one. My poison resistance would rise little by little, because this kind of metal not only greatly increased the weight of metal I could control but also raised poison resistance. Under normal circumstances, I might have spent about as much time as the system prompt indicated. But now, I had already activated the breathing chamber in my stomach. My digestion speed was 2.5 times normal, but the price was intense pain. Yet there was not much time left before the next portal opened. I had to make myself stronger in the shortest time possible. 2 days later, downstairs from my residence, Lee Wuncheol and his scout were standing there. And at this moment, the weight of metal I could control had already reached 17,499 grams, and my metal detection range had increased to 135 meters. Now, I could already control 60 short swords at the same time. I had also obtained a new skill that could directly shatter metal. With this skill, I could disable an enemy's weapon in an instant. Just then, I suddenly sensed a faint movement outside the door. The next second, the door panel was smashed apart by one punch from Lee Wuncheol. When he saw how calm I was standing there, he was stunned instead. I warned him that if he did not want a beating, he should get lost right now. But he would not listen at all and charged straight at me. In his view, last time it was only because he had been careless that I managed to suppress him. And that judgment was indeed correct. 2 days ago, I truly had not been fully confident in subduing him. But after devouring metal over these 2 days, my strength had already risen dramatically. Now, fighting as C-rank close combat type was ridiculously easy for me. But even after I knocked him to the ground, he still refused to accept it. He even said I had only been lucky and had merely happened to land one hit on him. Then he planned to directly activate his trait inside the room. I knew that if we fought here, ordinary people would definitely be caught in it. So I wanted to draw the battlefield outside. He thought I was trying to run and immediately came up and kicked out at me. The massive impact sent my whole body flying and blasted down part of the wall as well, and he immediately chased after me. After I came out, I first turned my lower limbs into steel. Then I used metal control to manipulate my steel-transformed legs. In this way, I dodged one of Lee Wuncheol's attacks in midair. He had never expected that I could forcibly change direction in the air, although the current me still could not fly freely the way I could in my previous life. Through skill linkage, I could already gain preliminary control over my own body. Yet he thought I had merely gained some cheap enhancement in the Legion. As he smashed a fist into the ground, the commotion spread instantly. Nearby residents also came out one after another to see what was happening. He could keep recklessly chasing me without caring at all. But I was a soldier, and I could not strike back in public. And he had also seen through my concern. So he simply tried to bring down the entire building directly. I stood in front of it and desperately tried to stop him, but he would not listen and insisted on making a move. I knew that someone like him was beyond saving, and I could only personally end his superhuman career. The halo in my eyes began to contract inward. When it condensed into the shape of an 8, the ring of light instantly appeared on his leg. This was the skill I had just obtained, Metal Shatter. It directly crippled his entire lower leg. Watching him collapse to the ground and scream in pain, I told him that next time, it would not be just one leg that got crippled. Soon after, the police arrived at the scene and took both of us away. After I finished explaining the situation, and after bystanders also testified, I was allowed to leave. The staff member even sighed and said it was his first time seeing an F rank defeat a C rank. After coming out, I immediately rushed towards Station A. Because unlike the previous 2 portal incidents, this time, in my previous life, I had not experienced it personally. So relying only on that limited information, variables were very likely to appear. By the time I arrived at Station A, there were only 8 minutes left before the portal opened. Although I really wanted to create a disturbance so the ordinary citizens could evacuate first, I could not do that, because among these people, there was also a villain hiding. If by any chance I let that guy hide in advance, then I would never again find the turning point that could change the future. When there were only 2 minutes left, Choi Seonha suddenly appeared and ran to my side. I immediately realized in my heart that the past had indeed already begun changing because of me. But what mattered most now was that disaster would descend in 1 minute. So I scattered the beads made of mithril onto the ground. This scene immediately drew curses from the people in the station hall. Choi Seonha also asked me why I was doing this. I only told her that later. When she saw my signal, she had to immediately run to a place with gas masks. As soon as I finished speaking, cracks appeared in the station's ceiling. Immediately after, a portal appeared out of thin air, and from within it, poisonous gas was continuously pouring out into the air. The next second, the body of a monster emerged from the gate. I turned around and told Choi Seonha to run. At the same time, the mother and daughter outside the station who had been saying goodbye were forcibly separated by a layer of black curtain. Immediately after that, the black curtain enveloped the entire station. To escape, survive for 6 hours or kill the boss monster. Only by surviving for 6 hours or killing the boss can it be lifted. And the spider-like monster inside the station also completely passed through the portal. Then it began attacking the crowd. I told Choi Seonha to evacuate the civilians, while I myself charged at the monster alone. At this time, the battalion commander was still in the brigade commander's office, reporting upward about promoting me to officer. The usually imposing battalion commander did not even dare breathe loudly in front of this old man, because this man was not only the brigade commander of the 3rd Demon Suppression Brigade, he was also the nation's 31st ranked A-rank player, able to cast wide area magic by himself. He was called one of the military's core combat forces at the level of a tactical weapon. After listening, the brigade commander rejected it on the spot. If even a mere F rank could be appointed an officer, then who would still apply to join the AMT in the future? But just as he finished speaking, the phone rang. On the phone, they were reporting the situation of a portal appearing at the station. When the two of them heard that this portal was an unfortunate event, both their expressions changed, because unfortunate events imposed debuffs on players. Moreover, the difficulty would also rise sharply. At this time, the monster inside the station was being besieged by the security personnel. They had never seen this kind of monster in the monster compendium, so they had no idea that this kind of monster was completely unafraid of flames. However, the squad leader quickly noticed the problem, so he immediately ordered his team members to switch to the freezing formation, planning to first hold this monster back and wait for the main force to come provide support. With one volley from everyone, the monster really was frozen. But the squad leader knew that this kind of restraint could not last long at all, so he prepared to use this opportunity to stab out the monster's eyes first. But just as he rushed above the monster's head, the magic array was directly broken through. Just when he thought he was about to be eaten by the monster, suddenly, a row of steel beads shot toward his shield. The beads struck the shield and sent his whole body flying away, which was how he narrowly escaped disaster. I knew that the outer layer of this monster's skin was covered with heavy steel, so ordinary attacks simply could not hurt it, and I had also only prepared for 2 days. I simply could not be certain whether I could defeat a monster of this level. But now was not the time for doubt, it was the time for confirmation. Thinking of this, I directly used Metal Shatter on the monster. As I kept increasing my force, the magic power inside my body was also being consumed rapidly, until only 76% remained. The magnetic rings in my eyes finally overlapped, and the metal armor on the monster's body was forcibly torn apart and shattered. This scene nearly made the security team's jaws drop. Looking at everything before me, I burst into loud laughter. With the power I now had, it should be enough to stop this portal, and perhaps even monopolize all the rewards. As the monster's armor exploded apart, it immediately let out a painful roar, and I took advantage of the momentum to summon up the steel beads on the ground and shoot them toward its body. Although it no longer had the protection of its armor, its physical toughness was still astonishingly high, so I continued controlling the steel beads to spin at high speed, as the beads crazily tore through its body. It finally could not endure it anymore and was completely slain by me. Watching this scene, the squad leader's face was filled with disbelief. Even with his entire team working together, they had not been able to injure the monster in the slightest. Yet the person before him had actually killed it alone. Although he had seen quite a few A ranks in many operations, this was still the first time he had seen someone so composed. So in the end, he even suspected that I was the legendary S-rank authority holder. And in the shadows, there was another person who hated me to the bone because I had destroyed his mission. Just as they were asking me whether I was an S-rank player, I coldly reminded them not to lower their guard, because the disaster had only just begun. The next second, several more monsters crawled out of the portal. But that battle just now had already let me completely regain my confidence. As I raised my finger, countless steel beads shot violently toward those monsters. Then, while the beads pinned down one of the monsters, I once again used Metal Shatter on another one. That monster easily broke free of the steel beads and turned to pounce at me. I immediately turned my lower limbs into steel. Then, with the aid of metal control, I flashed backward at extreme speed. Seeing this, the security personnel also once again activated the freezing formation against the monster. As for the other monster whose armor I had shattered, it quietly crawled up the wall, preparing to circle around and launch a sneak attack from behind. But I had long since locked onto its every movement. I directly controlled the steel beads and blasted them at its back. Then, using the same method, I made the beads spin at high speed. After piercing into its body, they killed it on the spot. And at that same moment, the other monster also broke through the freezing formation. I also happened to free up my hands at just that time. Then I used metal shatter once again. While breaking open its armor, I completed the kill. The villain hidden in the dark also received the notification that his mission had failed. He could not understand why a player with this level of strength would appear at the station. At this moment, the Legion also arrived at the scene, along with Blue Flame, the #1 private guild. A young player said that if it was only this scale, then why not gather all the mages and directly use siege magic to break the dome? But that dome was a rule created by the system. Unless the system itself was overthrown, it was absolutely impossible to break it. The only thing that could be done now was to wait until time ran out. At this time, the battalion commander and Blue Flame strategy director Lu Haina also arrived at the scene. Please survive for 6 hours, since only personnel below level May 15th enter this event in order to escape. And a top guild like Blue Flame simply had no members at such a low level. So this time, only the military could act. However, the battalion commander knew that I was inside the station right now. He told Lu Haina that inside the station there was a trump card worthy of trust. After I resolved the first wave of outbreak inside the station, I immediately gathered all the security personnel together. My sharp gaze swept back and forth among them, leaving them all looking confused. Because reports from my previous life had mentioned that the hidden villain was a member of the security team. But now, I had failed to find him among these people. At this time, Choi Seonha also rushed over. I immediately told them that this was a double portal. At the same time, inside the second portal, the villain hiding in the shadows received a new mission prompt. The third mission was for him to hand over the item in portal number 2 to the villain's alliance. As long as he completed this mission, he would be promoted into an official villain. Just then, he suddenly sensed the sound of something cutting through the air behind him. So he immediately summoned vines from beneath his feet, blocking the steel beads outside. Long time no see, Liang Zhu. When he heard someone directly call out his name, he looked outward, only to find that he did not know me at all. But I was far too familiar with this person, because in the future, he would stand at the peak of A-rank players, and become the villain known as Black Tentacle. In my previous life, he made me suffer terribly. You damned great villain. Although I do not know who you are, you should not have spoken the word villain. One look is enough to tell that you are about a rank in strength. Unfortunately, your ability is metal manipulation. No matter how high your level is, you still have to obey the rule of elemental restraint. After saying that, he controlled the vines and sent them pouncing toward me. But I understood elemental restraint more clearly than anyone. I first flashed aside to dodge the vines' attack. Then I controlled the steel beads and charged forward together with them. Seeing me rush straight at him, he was clearly startled. He hurriedly summoned vines again to block me, but I still kept changing positions and continuously pressured him, so he could only keep summoning vines without stopping. He could not understand why I kept launching these seemingly meaningless attacks, so he simply summoned a large number of vines and wrapped himself inside them. Seeing this, I directly leaped above the vines. It seems you still do not know that my ability is the man-eating tree. After saying that, it began devouring my arm. And as I felt that the fuel was already sufficient, the corners of my mouth slowly lifted. First, I turned my arm into steel. He was immediately puzzled as to why he could not digest my arm. The very next second, scorching flames began gathering in my mouth. The moment he saw the flames, he finally panicked. He immediately began begging for mercy and even promised to hand over all the reward items from this unfortunate event to me. Cut the crap. When he heard the words previous life, he was visibly stunned for a moment. And at this moment, the blazing flames in my mouth had already fully condensed. The high-temperature fire instantly engulfed his entire body. At the same time, outside the station, all teams below level 15 had also assembled. As they entered one after another, the system also displayed a prompt saying they could not exit. As soon as they entered the station, what they saw made everyone's scalp go numb. There, in the center of the hall, lay a gigantic spider they had never seen before. Seeing that the support troops had arrived, the security captain immediately went up to greet them. and said that fortunately, a member of the military had stepped in, preventing even greater casualties. He had thought that person would be Choi Seonha, whom he cared about most. But the next second, after learning from the security captain that it was actually me, his face immediately darkened. So he immediately said to everyone that I was only an F-rank piece of trash, and that from here on, he, as a C-rank, should be the one in command. After hearing that, the security captain was immediately displeased and directly asked him how he had gotten in. Isn't there a level 15 restriction here? And I am also C-rank, so why should I listen to your command? That one sentence left him completely speechless. Just then, Choi Seonha hurriedly ran over. The moment he saw the person he liked appear, he immediately went forward and fussed over her warmly. But Choi Seonha merely pushed him away and said something was wrong. The civilians had already discovered the double portal, and the scene had now already descended into complete chaos. As for Liang Zhu, I had already burned him until he had only one breath left. I raised my hand, controlled the steel beads, and sent him on his final journey. But just then, a patch of light suddenly lit up before my eyes. A golden portal slowly opened in front of me. Inside, it seemed like a paradise, and two angels also flew out from inside. At that exact moment, my magic power began recovering at high speed, and my physical strength instantly returned to its peak. As the two angels circled around me, "You have stopped a traitor to humanity," and a golden hidden quest window popped up. It said that I had thwarted the villain's plot and therefore obtained the chance to become a guardian of humanity. As soon as the voice fell, the angels wanted to pull me into the portal, and asked me whether I was willing to accept this quest. But I refused without the slightest hesitation. The two angels clearly had not expected that someone would refuse to become a guardian. This may be your last chance, but I knew very clearly that although the guardian quest was nominally about protecting humanity, at the end of the day, they were also an organization. Although one could obtain clear rewards, once a mission failed, one's actions would also be bound by periodic missions. More importantly, a mission was still just a mission. If someone used these missions maliciously, then even a guardian. In my previous life, Freesi, who personally killed me, had once also been a guardian. Seeing that I refused, the angels left in anger. After the portal closed, I picked something up from the pile of bones. This was the first reward of the unfortunate event. Akashic Arsenal Key number 2. This was the item the villains were willing to slaughter civilians to seize. So to them, this must be something indispensable. After I came out, I found that the civilians were arguing. Because the security team had concealed the existence of the double portal, their emotions had completely erupted. I did not even need to think to know that Liang Zhu must have spread this information. Immediately after that, I saw Li Minchi beside them as well. It seemed that in the end, the battalion commander still had not given up on the civilians inside the station. Even knowing it was almost certain death, he still sent people in to support us. And now, the civilians had already completely lost trust in the rescue squad. At this moment, I walked out and forcibly interrupted them. If this continues, once the second outbreak begins, everyone will die. With just this few of you, why should we believe you? Other than believing us, do you have any other choice? Not only were the civilians stunned by my icy tone, even the security team and the rescue squad were also suppressed into silence by those words of mine. Immediately after that, I spoke again. We are already risking our lives fighting. Other than us, who else here can fight? After hearing that, Li Minchi immediately accused me and asked what exactly I was saying to the civilians. I directly told them that I had stopped the double portal. After hearing this, the rescue squad was instantly invigorated. After hearing it, the security team became even more convinced that I was S-rank. Only Li Minchi still refused to believe it and insisted that I was lying. But I could not even be bothered to look at him. After hearing me out, the security captain immediately stood up straight and loudly answered, "Understood." Seeing that with just one sentence I had suppressed the entire scene and that he could not get a word in at all. Soon after, Park Junmu also brought over Choi Seonha's spellbook and my sword. As for me, I gathered everyone together and prepared to assign tasks. Although we had blocked the first outbreak, so the monsters appearing in the second wave were very likely to have spider traits. Watching everyone seriously listen to this trash talk, Li Minchi, I first told them to put on their gas masks in advance. Next, I was going to explain the battle plan for this operation. When the second outbreak begins and the monsters appear, first draw their attention and lure them outside. I will handle that task. The rescue team and the security team will each split into one group and wait outside on standby. Then, from positions with cover, attack the monsters that I lure out. Just like in the first outbreak, all you need to do is restrain the monsters and buy time. You are absolutely not allowed to act rashly, and absolutely must not get close. After you have restricted the monsters, I will make my move, and use metal shatter on them. As long as I tear open their armor, you will focus your fire on that spot and kill them all. Next comes the crucial part. In order to increase the success rate of this operation, Lee Minchi must stay with Choi Seonha at a high position and be responsible for command. If you, squad leader Lee Minchi, can use your distortion ability to keep me moving continuously, then I can devote all my magic power and stamina to shattering the monster's armor. And with Choi Seonha replenishing your magic power at any time by your side, captain of the rescue team, I will leave this matter to you. After hearing this, Lee Minchi immediately felt secretly delighted. Just then, movement suddenly came from the portal. I immediately realized that the second wave was about to begin and told everyone to get ready. As a spider dropped down from above. Filled with confidence, I was just about to step forward. But the next second, a system prompt suddenly popped up. After seeing the contents, my whole body froze. I clearly remembered that the boss should only appear after the second wave outbreak. I immediately turned around and shouted that the situation had changed, telling everyone to run. A thought flashed through my mind instantly. Could it really be because I had changed the future? But now, there was no longer time to think about it. If we could not stop this thing now, then all of us would die here. So I immediately tried to shatter the boss's armor. As my magic power kept draining away, the armor on the boss, however, did not change in the slightest. The next second, the system directly displayed a notification that the shatter had failed. Then the boss locked onto me as well and swung its sharp tentacles stabbing toward me. I hurriedly turned my lower limbs into steel again. Then, with the aid of metal control, I forcibly achieved brief flight. Looking at that strike just now, I realized it had been able to easily cut through even such thick metal. But the next second I realized that what had just been cut apart was the station's load-bearing pillar. Immediately after that, the boss attacked me again. I could only immediately dodge and spin away, barely avoiding it. Then I took the initiative and flew toward it. Although the chance of success was very low, this was the only method left now. Very quickly, I arrived directly above the boss. Seeing what I was doing, everyone broke out in cold sweat. Lee Minchi, I trust you. You will definitely be able to see it, right? Because in my previous life, I knew that after becoming an officer, he had completely memorized all the tactical textbooks. At first, he still could not understand what exactly I was trying to do. They saw me withstand the boss's attacks while continuously weaving through the air. As my magic power plummeted rapidly, step by step, I guided the boss into cutting through one pillar after another. Only then did Lee Minchi finally understand my true purpose. He finally realized that I wanted to make the entire roof collapse and directly crush the boss to death. So he immediately told Choi Seonha to channel magic power to him to the greatest extent possible. At the moment I rushed toward the last pillar. The boss's attack had also already closed in before my eyes. I could only mobilize my last bit of magic power and turn my whole body into steel. As the last pillar was cut through, the entire building began to crack in large areas. I knew this place was about to collapse completely, but I absolutely could not let the boss notice in advance. So at this moment, only I myself could serve as this bait. Seeing this, Lee Minchi directly cursed that I was insane and told me to get out quickly, because once he activated distortion space, I too would be swept into it. And I only told him, now. Helpless, he could only activate distortion space. The next second, a huge magic circle rose beneath the boss's feet. Then it instantly transferred it to the very center of the hall. I knew it, if it was Lee Minchi, he would definitely be able to do it. Immediately after that, the entire building completely collapsed.